Hello Internet! Today we're going to be going back to DataCube. Specifically, we're going to be working with Azure Functions and GitHub Webhooks. So the idea here is we are going to have a webhook that we're going to connect to. In this case, it's going to be GitHub. And when something happens on GitHub, it will invoke our service, and our service will do something. If you're not familiar with GitHub or with DataCube, hopefully you're familiar with GitHub or Git. It's this little cube behind me there. And so that cube, there's lights inside of it. It's not, and it reacts to events. So we've built this on the channel previously, so I'm not going to go into super amounts of detail here. But that's sort of what it does. It connects to all these services and then visually displays them as things happen on them. So we've connected it to Discord, Twitter, and now we're doing GitHub. So if you guys fork the repo or something, we should see something pop up. That's sort of the general idea. We're actually not going to get to the DataCube integration here because that's just submitting events, and we've already done that. This is going to be specifically focusing on setting up Azure Functions and deploying them, and then setting up the webhook in GitHub to actually talk back to them. That's sort of what this is going to be about. So before we get into too much depth, Functions as a service, which is what Azure Functions is, AWS Lambda, Google Functions, I think that's what it's called. And there's a whole bunch of other function as a service things. If you ever see serverless, that's sort of the name it's been going under. But generally the idea is instead of deploying a giant like web app or even a microservice, a function as a service is just that. It's just a function. And in most cases, it's not even like a binary. It's literally your code in the cloud that gets compiled on some infrastructure you don't necessarily know what it is, and then gets run. And so the cool thing with that is it scales really well, and it can scale to demand for pretty much anything. So if you're connecting to events, for example, if you get a ton of events at midnight for whatever reason, or maybe you're doing like shopping stuff and a bunch of people come and buy stuff on like Black Friday, that kind of thing, it gives it a really good chance to scale up to handle that and then scale back down. And since with cloud stuff you only pay for what you use, it's a fairly cheap way to do those kind of operations. So there's the option there. And with the current tech, it takes only a few milliseconds for it to kind of start up. So it's not really too slow either. So we've done a little bit with them, but we're going to go into a little bit more depth. So I have the Azure Portal here, GitHub Webhooks, and here on my other screen, because of course it's on my other screen, is Visual Studio. I've created a functions folder. We're going to create a new Azure Functions. I'm going to throw this in our functions folder. Already created that, so there's that. And we're just going to call this DataCube Functions. And so this is just going to store a whole bunch of functions. And then every function is going to reside inside a class. So you notice we don't get any CS anything. It's just there. So we need to actually add one. So just new item, class, but we want an Azure function. So this is going to be our GitHub webhook. Let's do DataCube GitHub webhook. Kind of making that up. But then you're going to get given all of these options. There's two webhooks. You can do a generic webhook or a GitHub webhook. Webhooks are used for other things than just GitHub, obviously. They're used all over. If you're writing like a Slack bot, I believe Slack uses webhooks as a way to actually create your bot. So every time somebody types something in chat, it sends a webhook to your chatbot, and then your chatbot figures out what to do. So that's what you would use a generic webhook for. But we can just use the GitHub one because it's already there. And there we go. So this is what we get. There's not too much going on here. The webhook type is GitHub. I think the other one is generic. And then we're just going to get a request and a logger so we can actually log some things out. And then in this specific example that they have, if there's a comment, it's just going to write that out. So this would happen if you say commented on a pull request or something. or just commented on really anything in the project, you're going to get a comment webhook called, and then it's going to come to this, theoretically. So this is all red. That's actually, I think, a problem with Visual Studio, because if I build this, it works. So this should be fine. We don't need to really change anything here. I just kind of want to show you, this is literally all of our code. We don't have to do anything else. We've given it a function name, which is how it's going to be labeled and how the endpoint is actually going to be assigned to it. That's just here. We have a type. If you're doing like an HTTP request or connecting to a queue, those are going to look a little bit different, and those are some other options for function as a service. But for the most part, this is it. And they can get bigger than this or smaller than this, but yeah, this is pretty much all you need to do. So with this, I'm not really going to go into building this out. That's just coding stuff. It's literally just build something, return it. So here we're just returning a string. So if we get a comment, we return a string. That's it. So now I want to publish this. I'm just going to write this out to Azure. And then with webhooks, you need a URL, a static URL that you can actually get to, because you need to tell GitHub what to invoke. And if you're running it locally, your IP is almost certainly going to change. So it's not really going to work. But for us, we can just create a new Azure function and click publish. And this is going to just fill out all of this stuff and create a bunch of all that. Let's see, we'll create it for data cube, app service plan, sure. Gonna want a new one of those. Let's do data cube functions. Sure. Pretty sure I want, yeah, that. I want numbers, but oh well, I guess. This will be easier. There we go. Just so those match. Then data cube functions. Cool. Got all of that. It's going to create some services for us so that our function actually knows what it's doing. And then I just click create. This is going to go out to Azure and actually create this in my central cluster. So I don't really have too much out there right now, but this should be enough to get us started. It's just going to run through and deploy this quick. It goes a little bit slowly at first. After you've done it once, it only deploys deltas. So all like the dependencies and binaries and stuff don't keep getting uploaded. That only happens once. So this should get faster if we need to change this. I don't think we will, but that's that. So I'm going to wait until this gets done, and then we'll pick it back up, and we should be good. So I will see you when that's done. We're done now. We've created this new data cube functions thing. So it's done all of this stuff. We get this, we get some password stuff. Not going to show you that because that'd be silly. And then if I go into my Azure Portal, we have 3 new things that popped up. We have that, which I don't really know what that is. Storage account. Okay, so that's going to store the binary stuff. Then we have our actual function, and this is our app service. So we care about the function. So we're going to go into here, and I need to get into this data cube webhook, and this is actually our function. That project is what was deployed. We can have multiple functions in that project and deploy them all. Then there's these 2 things here. So I want to get the function URL, which is this, and bring that over and create a webhook. I can't show you the second part of this because you would you'd see the GitHub password. Not going to show you that, but I can just do that. All of this stuff, I'm going to probably delete all these functions, all this stuff that we're creating here after this, just because I don't really want you guys to leak or grab some of this and start using it. That's not really the point here. This is more to show you how to do it. So Done all of this, that's our payload URL. That's where GitHub is going to send the request. And then we need a secret. So I need to go back here and get rid of that and click this button. But I'm not going to show you me clicking this button. I'm just going to do it and then paste it over here. And then once that's done, we are going to subscribe to everything. There's 3 options. We can subscribe to push events, which is just if something gets pushed to any of your repositories. So if somebody else is trying to make a change or you're trying to make a change, send me everything would send you every request. Or individual events will let you subscribe to all of the current events, and you can pick and choose which ones. Probably going to choose this one because you should be able to go back and change this. This part isn't final, the top bit is. So I'm going to go do that now, and we're probably going to just hit send me everything. That way I will just get all the events, and I can figure out on my function side what I like and what I don't like. Because I would like to just notify on everything, I think. I'll figure that out. I can change it later. So there we go. Gonna go and set that up now. Okay, so we have our webhook set up. It does one ping. So by default, GitHub will send a ping event to your function, which we might have gotten. If I go to monitor, this will allow us to browse the logs and stuff for this service. We may see that ping event, or I may need to do something on one of my repos in order to trigger this. For some reason, this is always really slow, and I don't really know why. Okay, it would appear we have nothing. That's great. I'm going to go trigger something then. So if I go to just a repository, and let's create something on this. So let's say I want to change the README and say this project is only for testing. And we're going to just commit this directly to master. Okay. Done. And so that's probably not the best way to do that, but we've made a change now. Theoretically, there should be a invocation against this. Or not. Maybe I missed something. So we've connected our function, done all of that stuff. Did I do everything? This is the first time I've set up these using Azure Functions, so I don't know if I'm missing anything. I don't think so, though. That's not correct. That's just for the project, that setting. Let's go to Settings, Webhooks. And now we're getting errors. Oops. Invalid HTTP response. Uh-oh. So here is what GitHub sent us. All of this fun stuff. So that is what we're actually getting. So actually, if I go back here to our actual function, we're actually using a dynamic object, which means it just is created based on, it's sort of like a dictionary that you can dig into. If you ever used an untyped language, it's the same thing, just a little bit with C# goodness. And so we can mess with that if we need to. But what was the error we were getting? Response 400. Could not find a valid configuration for webhook receiver GitHub. And instance that. The setting must be set to a value between 16 and 128 characters. Did I do this wrong? Client ID is master. If I delete that, I don't actually know if that's a good idea. We're going to try it. Worst case, it doesn't work. I can redeliver this, and this will just resend it. we'll know if it errors again that that didn't actually change anything. Now we get a different error. Cool. Okay, must contain an entity body formatted as JSON. I'm gonna go look up why this is happening. This is not something I'm familiar with, so one sec. Okay, so I got it working again. I changed two things. First, I reset this and just recopied it. It just didn't make any sense not to do that. And then switch this from XWW form URL encoded to JSON. That's sort of what you would expect since we're getting JSON. So if I save this, if I update this webhook now with this, it's already worked because I tried it once just to make sure I wasn't just going in circles or something. But we can actually send these and it works, which is good. The reason we weren't seeing logs, I'm pretty sure I haven't tested this yet. I don't know if we got any logs. My guess is, yeah, Azure Functions prior to actually getting that would have validated that and seen that that wasn't actually a request that mapped to the function correctly. So it didn't really match the function. Just like in ASP, when you're actually trying to hit something, the ASP validates the request prior to it actually hitting your controller. That seems to be what happened here. So HTTP trigger function processed a request. Cool. That's it. And we get that because that is coming right from here. So now, every time I change anything on the repository, I get all those events. So that is sort of basics of how to subscribe to it. You could probably do this, set this up real quick now, especially now that I know what I'm doing. It probably is the kind of thing where you can do this in minutes. And maybe this GitHub webhook isn't sort of what you want. Maybe you want to use a different Git repo, or you want to integrate with Slack or something else. You can do that just by creating a new function. I've never actually tried this. We're going to go on another tangent. So let's try, like if I want to call this a GitLab, let's match this. DataCube GitLab webhook. Now I don't have a GitLab account and I don't actually know anything about it, but know it's a thing and I know it's a GitHub competitor. So if I go git generic webhook here, we get pretty much the same thing and everything is happening the same. The only difference is this is expecting some specific parameters to be passed to it. So in this case, it's expecting a first and a last, probably the name. That would be my guess. But this, if it's a webhook that gets past the first and the last, will give you a hello response. But the only difference here is it just gets generic JSON instead of everything else. But that's it. That's the only difference. So yeah, I will leave this here. There's a lot more with Azure Functions that we could get into, or just functions as a service in general. They're pretty handy, but they're fairly new. And so because of that, it's kind of difficult to kind of work with them. Because if you work with Azure Functions, it's not going to work anywhere else. They are open sourcing it, but it's not to that point yet. So you're kind of stuck on Azure. If you do AWS Lambda, same thing. You're just stuck on Amazon. And same thing with Google. And each of them kind of have their own syntax and support levels and different languages and things like that. So it's still new. But it's still pretty cool, and for handling this kind of stuff or any event-driven stuff where you have like a queue, it's really handy because it can scale up to handle a giant backlog if that starts growing without too much cost of just sitting around constantly. If you just have a server that's sitting there and you only get events like every night, you're wasting 23 hours of the day. These functions will just scale down. I don't know if you can see that, but right now, my function shouldn't be actually like running. I don't really know how to show that, but your functions actually have a cold and a hot start time. When you call the function, if it hasn't been called within like the past 30 seconds, it will start up and actually create an instance for you. But if it's waited longer than that, or if it's less than that actually, it'll just call the same old container and just keep going on that. So it kind of is, I don't know, intelligent in that way. That's all handled behind the scenes. You don't really need to worry about that. That's why it's serverless. You're not really worried about the architecture or what infrastructure you're running on. You don't care what software or what OS your system is running. You're just running code somewhere. So that's pretty much that. But if there's other things you guys want to see with functions as a service or other Azure things, let me know. But that's it for this video. So till next time, see you, Internet.